Point of homework.
Míle cean córa agus gur míle mágad a sut an Saincheist Thrathúil seo a ranú tá sé pránach agus tá sé har a bheith táhachtach. Banan má ceist le brethúnas a thug an cuairt a chorc breis caiicí seo hin an jeú lá den bhí seo. Agus sa bhrethúna sin chuir siad policy dearfach an rialtas neamhnaí. Sin policy maidir le stoc na níosc a chosint agus slí marachtála na níoscarí fud na tíre a chosint freisin nó a láidrú. Agus cén fá a chur siad an policy seo neamhnaí mar rinne an rialtas nó an rainn práiseach den próisis commerceáide. Agus hep go hiile is go thomláin an rainn agus an rialtas an dúlgus de lathúla bhí orthú a cholíniú sin dul I deangáil le sasanna agus leis an Aontas Eorpach. Agus suntasí go leor ara ní rah éon asantas ón cuairt seo ó híomh có táhachtach is atá an policy go bhfuil sé dearfach, go bhfuil an rud atá I gceist ag an rialtas ná stoc na níosc a chosint. Agus mar a dúirt me cosint agus takeíocht a thuirt don na hIascairí fud na tíre lasté den 6,000. Minister, my question is very specific. It's really urgent and it's very important. It relates to a judgment given by the Court of Appeal in two parts, one in July and the final judgment more than 2 weeks ago on the 10th of March. Significantly, I asked a question just the evening before that and nobody seemed to know that this case was coming up for final judgment the following day. And in that judgment, the court said that the policy of the government was, they quashed the policy of the government. Why? Because they failed on one ground. They failed to comply with their legal obligation to notify England and the European Union in relation to the policy they were bringing in. Now, significantly, the policy is a wonderful policy. It was brought in 19 to come into effect in January 20, over 3 years ago, with the specific aim of conserving the stock, the fishing stock, and to help fishermen in the area. I'm going to read out just what the judgment said in July. The policy directive was a measure for the conservation of fish stocks. Absolutely. The failure to notify the measure pursuant to the provision at the time didn't invalidate it. The policy directive was not discriminatory. They had the power to bring this in. It was not irrational. It was not invalid. So all positive stuff about this policy and the essence of what it was about. But it failed, not because it failed on its communication strategy in Ireland, because it failed to give warning to the European Union and to England. And now we have no policy, more than 3 years after it was brought in, to conserve fishing stock, to protect biodiversity, and to give small fishermen a chance by excluding boats over 18 metres. Now it's a free-for-all. It's open season now, and the taking of sprat in an unsustainable manner has continued unabated. So my specific question, Minister, staying within the time limit, is what urgent actions is the government now taking? What timeline have we now got for the implementation of the policy, having consulted properly with Europe and England?
Minister.
Thanks, Chair. And on behalf of Minister McConalogue, I want to thank Deputy Connolly for providing an opportunity to update the House regarding the recent Court of Appeal ruling on the policy directive introducing a ban on trawling inside the 6 nautical mile limit and the events that leading up to this ruling. As the House may be aware, in December of 2018, following a public consultation process in which over 900 submissions were received, the Minister for Agriculture, Food and Marine announced that vessels over 18 metres would be excluded from trawling in inshore waters inside the 6 nautical mile zone and the baselines from the 1st of January 2020. A transition period of 3 years was allowed for vessels over 18 metres, targeting sprat to provide a reasonable period of adjustment for these vessels, as the sprat fishery is concentrated inside the 6 nautical mile zone. A policy directive was issued by the Minister to the Independent Licensing Authority to give effect to these measures. The policy directive directed the Licensing Authority to insert a condition to this effect into the licences of affected vessels. Following this, a judicial review to the High Court was taken by 2 applicant fishermen challenging the validity of the policy. On the 6th of October 2020, the judge held, in summary, that the High Court's final order should include a declaration that Policy Directive No. 1 of 2019 was made in breach of fair procedures and is void and are of no legal effect. The breach of fair procedures, as referenced above, related to a failure to consult with the applicants in accordance with and to the extent required by the consultation process, and in particular by failing to consult with them a second time once a preferred option had been identified. A stay on the order was refused by the High Court on the 10th of December 2020. Minister McConalogue appealed the decision of the High Court to the Court of Appeal, also seeking a stay on the order of the High Court. The Court of Appeal reinstated the Ministerial Policy Directive on the 19th of March 2021, when the Court was persuaded that the balance of justice leaned in favour of the State, and granted a stay on the order of the High Court up until the hearing of the substantive appeal in June. Following a full hearing by the Court of Appeal on the 22nd of June 2021, the Court decided to temporarily extend the policy directive, excluding large vessels from trawling in inshore waters within 6 miles of the coast, save for a restricted sprat fishery. On September the 23rd, 2021, the Court of Appeal refused the application Minister McConalogue had made to further continue the stay. This refusal meant that the decision of the High Court stood. This allowed vessels over 18 metres in length to resume trawling in the waters inside 6 nautical miles. The Court of Appeal issued an unapproved judgment on the 19th of July last and requested further submissions from both parties. These were provided to the Court on Minister McConalogue's behalf. As the House may be aware, the Court of Appeal issued a final judgment on the 10th of March last, stating that the applicant fishers were successful on the narrowest of grounds. Minister McConalogue is currently consulting with legal advisers to consider the implications of the judgment and the next possible steps.
Thank you for that. And the main question that I asked is not really dealt with. I've read the High Court judgment, I've read the Court of Appeal, and I've read the second judgment. And I'm after saying clearly that the policy was very good. The courts had no difficulty with the policy. It was in relation to the failure of the government. What you call the narrowest of grounds was a legal obligation on them to notify England and Europe to allow them to have a say in this policy. Now we're in the crazy situation, and I can only describe it as crazy, or crazy doesn't capture it, a situation where it's a free-for-all within the 6 mile limit now as a result of the failure of the department to carry out their duty. It is beyond me how that happened, but now that the mistake has been made, what are we doing about it? How quickly can we rectify the mistake? And when will this very good policy, which is absolutely essential, it followed a long process of consultation. You've outlined 900 submissions, the vast majority appealing to the government to do something about sustainability within the 6 mile limit. Since then, we've had the High Court, the Court of Appeal, and the final judgment more than 2 weeks ago. And you're telling me it's the narrowest of ground, no explanation as to how they failed to comply with their duty, but more importantly, how to rectify that mistake as quickly as possible, reinstate the policy, what steps are going to be taken. In the meantime, if you look at the figures for sprat, every single year from 19 onwards, They have absolutely significantly increased, even though the International Council for the Exploration of the Seas had recommended that the catch should be no more than 2,800 tonnes. We've had 14,000, 15,000, 14,000, 12,000 and so on. A drastic reduction in the annual sprat catch is urgently needed for so many obvious reasons, Minister. So if you could, in the last 2 minutes, please give me a time span when this is going to be rectified and how the mistake was made.
Thank you. Thanks, Deputy. I'm not in a position to be able to give you a time span here and now. I have stated to you, given you the chronology of events of which you're well aware, and indeed you've told me that you've followed the case and read the judgment. And suffice to say that I can just make the Minister McConalogue well aware of the concerns that you've articulated here in the House this evening. And I have nothing further to add other than what I've already stated, in that Minister McConalogue is consulting with her legal advisers in relation to the implications of the judgment and what steps they can take next.